Okay, today we'll learn HTML5, especially form section. Let's go to there. Here we can see many chapters we just finished, and we are supposed to complete this chapter. And this one is the very long chapter, and yeah, we'll complete. This lecture is third lecture and especially part C. Okay, let's try to expand a little bit. And you can see the left side, the chapters are gone away because this is responsive web design. Okay, let's start from this chapter. Still we are learning form related elements, and this input element or input tag is very important element. This chapter describes the different input types for the input element. There are many input types. Here, type, and you can see many different types here. Button, checkbox, color, date, email, file, hidden, image, month, number, password, radio, range, reset, search, submit, telephone, text, time, URL, week. So many types. Okay, we'll look at each type from this text. Let's start. This one is defining a single line text input field. We learned a little bit about this in advance, but we'll look at this one again. And this input can be embedded here in this form element. And let's try to do this real example as we used already in other chapters. Here, as I mentioned already, if we are putting some input values like this, ID and password, ID, first name and the last name, and the submit, each one, that is an input, and that input value will be transmitted to the server, and the server side, this action, this one is containing the URL of that program in the server. And let's focus on this. We are learning this type text, and here we can put in plain text. Here, any plain text, arbitrary characters we can put in here. And here, this one, input type is submit. We can submit. Then this variable and the value pair, and this ampersand is the delimiter for them. This one will be transmitted to the server. And the server program, this action page.php, this program will take care of that. And this tutorial is not dealing into that server script. Simply we are sending, and that's it. Variable and the value pair, those are sent. Another type, password. Probably almost every day you are using this type to log in the website. Okay, let's look at this real example. And this one is using that password type. Okay, if the type is password, then let's look at this one first. This one is plain text, and this one is showing the characters which I typed in, but this one you cannot see because that is secure character string or any characters you are using as a password, and that should be secure, and you cannot see that. In that case, you can use this password type. Okay, input type submit. Even though we used already this input type tag submit, input type submit, this one is defining a button for submitting form data to a form handler, that is server-side program. And this one is typically a server page with a script for processing input data. And as I mentioned already, the form handler, that program is specified in the form's action attribute, like this. URL for that, for the server-side program. And let's look at this real example. And the previous one, as we learned already, those are very similar or same, and those initial value, those are shown here. And if we are submitting, then the variable and the value pair. The variable is, as I mentioned already, the name attribute is containing that variable name, and the value that is containing that initial value for that variable, and that can be changed. You can change that. Okay, then you can see the variable name and the value pair, variable and the value pair, and this ampersand is delimiting them. And if we have more pairs, then we can enumerate here. Okay, you can try others. Another type, reset. There are so many input types, thus we are learning each one by one. When sometimes we are trying to reset, then we can use this reset type. And this one is resetting all form values to their default values. Let's look at. Also in our name portal, wopen.com, when we are putting some data, some social name card contents, if we want to reset, then we can click that reset button. We are using that. Okay, this one. Let's focus on that specific type which we are learning. The others we learned already, thus let's focus on that. This one is here. Okay, this one is default one, and this one is showing Korean default character string. And you can change probably with this one. Run again, and you can see that value, that reset, that is shown here. If we are not using this one, then the default value will be shown here. This Korean character then means reset. that is shown here. Okay, you can try others. And let's look at this radio type. This one is also one of the most important input types. Radio buttons. With this one, we can select only one of a limited number of choices, and the choices are here. We can select only one. Exclusively only one we can select. Let's look at here. This one is using radio type. Also this one is using radio type. Radio type here. 3 radio type input. This one, this one, this one. And this one is shown because of this radio type. And we can select only one exclusively. And here we should be careful about this. Name. That is a variable name. When we are submitting to the server, the name field, this one is containing that variable name. The gender is the variable for that. And we should be very careful about this. The gender, the variable name should be exactly the same. Here, if we are changing this one, let's make it different from others. And let's learn again. And I'll choose this one. And exclusively I want to choose another one. But you can see those are not exclusive. We can select many. And even this one we can select. If we are using different variable name contained in this name here, that should be exactly the same to make them exclusive. Only one can be selected here. Okay, radio button, you should be careful about that. I may ask in the quiz or midterm exam. Okay, another type, checkbox. Sometimes in the web application, we may use this checkbox. And the name is checkbox. That is self-explaining. Okay, here. Sometimes we can see this kind of application in any web application, and that is using checkbox. This checkbox is different from radio button. Radio button, that should be exclusive selection, but this one you can select many if you want and submit. Then you can see this variable and the value pair, those are selected in this checkbox and those are sent to the server. Here let's focus on that checkbox here, the type. And you can see the variable name, this one, that is the value for that attribute name, and selected value, that is here. And you can see, let's look at first one. First one is vehicle 1, and this variable will contain the value bike, like this. And the others are same conceptually. Okay, let's move to the next. Another type, button. Even though we learned already, this one is showing again, and this one is repeating because that button here, that button is belonging to this category. So sometimes W3Schools.com is repeating again and again. That may be better for understanding. Okay, here, and let's focus on that type button here, and this one is here. Click me, that value is here, and that is the button title, like this. And as soon as I click this one, then this alert, this one is showing this alert statement here, hello world. And if we are clicking this one is Korean character, yes, or confirm, or okay. Usually alert function is showing this one, and one button to show, and here we can click, then we can go to the next. This one is JavaScript, thus you don't need to worry about at this moment, and later after midterm exam we will learn about JavaScript. And this alert is the function belonging to the JavaScript. Another type, there are so many input types, and we are learning still. Type color, this one is used for input fields that should contain a color, and depending upon your browser supportability, the color picker may be different. And if you are using your handphone or smartphone, then may be a little bit different. You can try. Okay, here, this is color picker. Here, let's focus on the source first. Left side, we are learning this color type. And this one is being used in this input element, and this type attributes is containing that color type, then we can show this. Initial value, color was red, like that. You can change that. Instead of this, how about RGB, blue? And let's learn again, then you can see. And because of this type color, this color picker is shown here. And if you are clicking this one, then you can see this color picker. Here you can choose, or he can choose there are many different colors here. And you can choose, let's choose this one, and you are clicking this one, confirm or yes or okay, then that will be selected here. And if you are sending this one to the server, then this hexadecimal value for the color will be sent to the server. For some specific design, the color you can change any arbitrary color you can select for the design. Okay, after closing some open the tabs, so let's move to the next. Another type, date. This name, type name, date, that is self-explaining. That is showing some date. Let's look at here. Input type date. Then you can see this is Korean because default language is Korean. But if you are using default language English, then you can see year, month, day, and you can choose here year, month, and finally date, day. And if you select it, then you can send to the server with this submission. And input date, year, month, day, that value will be sent to the server, and this is the variable containing that variable value. Also, we can use maximum, minimum to confine, to provide some limitation, to provide some range for that date. We can use this maximum date and the minimum date, and then we can choose date between them. Okay, this date before, enter date before, enter date before here. Does that before means that should be the maximum, and the others you cannot. Okay, that is just below that year, before that year, and even after date we can select it is maximum, minimum. Here this one is maximum and this one is minimum. There's after that you can select, and you can try to select some date before this, but that is not possible because that is the minimum. Okay, let's move to the next. Input type date, time local, and this one specifies a date and the time input field to no time zone. Depending upon the browser support, the date picker can show up in the input field, and you can try. Input type email, we are using email address. In that case we may use this one. It will be convenient to show some email format and to check, to verify whether that is email address or not. Simply here type email, then if we are trying to put in some arbitrary and that is not email format and we are trying to submit, then this one is checking. Okay, this warning message is a Korean message and showing this email address is not containing this one at, and please try to use at like that. Then it is not checking thoroughly, it is checking simply. It is, even though it is not email format, after that there should be something more, but okay, this one is still checking, and even though this one is not email format because this is numeric number, but this one is checking simply whether that is using at this special character and before some character string and after some character string. If that is using that character string, then that is verified as an email address. There is no error message. Thus the checking is not checking thoroughly. Another type, file. Sometimes we want to transmit some file to the server, and we should select some files in my computer. Then we can select. If we are using this type attribute and the value is file here, the type file, and here we can select. This one is showing this folder, and we can select. For example, like this, and that will be sent. If I am clicking this submit button, and we can show that directory and the file names with this file type. Another type, months. This one is related to the months, and sometimes we want to show some months, and we can select as an input. Then here year first and months until months we can select. Even though this type is months, we can select year and months. That's it. Here, let's look at this note. Type months is not supported in Firefox, Safari, or Internet Explorer 11 or earlier version. They are not supporting properly. There's recent HTML5 supportability that is a little bit different from browser or browser from version, depending upon the version. Even though that is the same browser, depending upon the version, the supportability may be different. Another type, number. Sometimes we want to put in some numeric number like this. Here, type number, and the minimum 1 and maximum 5. We can provide this selection here, and the user can select some number between them. If we are increasing this one like 15, then we can select other numbers between 1 and 15 defined here, minimum 1 and maximum 15, and we can submit as we did already in other example. Input restrictions. We can provide some limitation. And here attribute name value is checked. This one is checking whether that is checked or not, and this one is specifying that an input field should be checked first. If we are using this checked, then the radio button, the default checking will be shown first. Disabled. Sometimes we want to make that input field disabled, then we cannot modify because that is disabled. And also we can use this maximum and the maximum length of that character string for an input field, we can limit due to these restrictions. Minimum. And the pattern also, we can provide some pattern to put in, because the depending upon that application, the input pattern may be different. Think about the telephone number. The telephone number should be in some format. Then we can provide that pattern. Then if that is not following, if our input is not following that pattern, then the error will be checked. There's in advance, before sending to the server, in this client side, to your smartphone, or to your PC, that will be checked in advance. Thus, it is reducing the server's burden. If we are not checking thoroughly, then the error input value will be transferred to the server, and the server will send the error message again, and some time will be elapsed. Sometimes if that input field should be filled in, then that should be required. It is required attribute value. Size. We can specify the size, the width of an input field. In the window, the size in that window screen, we can specify in terms of the design. The size may be important. Sometimes, depending upon the step value, we can increment by this step. Let's look at that example and the value. And this one is specifying the default value as we used already. And let's look at some example here. This one is showing minimum, maximum, and the step and value all together here, some of them of the previous examples. Okay, here this type is number, and the minimum 0 and the maximum 100. Thus we can confine that input number. Also we can control that increment, that is incremented by 10, like this. From 0 to 10, it is jumping to 10 because we are using this step. If we are using this step 1, then learn again, and we can increment more like this. And the initial value, that is 30, but we can change that to 70. Then we can show initially that initial value. Another type, range. Sometimes we provide some range of that input value like this, and the minimum and the maximum between them we can show. But this one is showing this range figure. Thus here, instead of writing some number, we can select among these ranged value. And depending upon your browser, that the image may be a little bit different. You can try it to your smartphone. Then you may see some minimum value and the maximum value. The selected value that can be shown depending upon the browser, that may be different a little bit. Input type search. This one is to show this magnifier, but this one is not showing. Some with other smartphone, you may see different image here. Instead of this plain submit button, instead of this plain input entry, you can see some magnifier. That means searching. That is search icon. You may see. You can try it to your smartphone later. Telephone number. Sometimes we want to take some telephone number, and we are worrying about the format, whether that input numbers are complying to that telephone number. And if that is not complying to the telephone number, that wrong input numeric number, that will be transferred to the server, and the server will check, and it is responding right again that error message, and it takes time. Thus it is not so good in terms of performance. But if we are using this input type telephone, then on the client side, before sending to the server, this input telephone number, that can be checked depending upon that pattern. Here, pattern. This attribute name pattern is providing the pattern of that numeric number here. 0 from 0 to 9, any number between them, 3 characters, and the dash after that, like our telephone number, and another numeric number from 0 to 9, 2 digits here, and another number, 3 numbers here, and those numbers, each one should be between 0 and 9, because those are telephone numbers. You can try here. Okay, this one is checking the format, telephone number format. And here, telephone, we are using type telephone, and the pattern, this one. Here, the placeholder, this one is the initial telephone number shown here. That is placeholder. If you are changing other default telephone number like this, then it will show that the default initial telephone number. For that purpose, we can use this placeholder attribute. And anyhow, we can change this one, but in this way, if we are changing in this way, then it is checking that format, whether that is complying to that format, because we are specifying this pattern here. 3 digits first, and the 2 digit, and the 3 digit. And this one is showing some error message. Please comply to the required pattern. There's we should provide some correct format. Like this. then it is successful. Thus, this variable and the value pair, those are sent successfully to the server. Another type, time. Some type, the name is self-explanatory, and here type, time, that is self-explaining. It is explaining about time. Time zone here. Select a time. In the morning and in the afternoon, you can select PM or AM. Sorry about that Korean character. That the setting is Korean setting. There's this one is showing that. Okay, there are so many input types, and as I mentioned, this is probably the longest chapter among many other chapters in HTML5. URL. Okay, let's look at this input type URL. As the name, this one URL means, this one is about the URL format, whether that input character string that is complying to the URL format, and depending upon the client device, that supportability may be different. Probably in the PC, or depending upon the browser of that PC, that supportability may be different. In the Chrome browser, let's look at this one. Here we should provide some URL. URL means some protocol name here, and some domain name, and sometimes some file name like this. Then that is complying to that URL format. But this one is showing some error message because this one is not supporting well enough. You can try it to your smartphone, then that may be successful. Thus you can see the different result. Okay, another one, type week. This one is showing some week, and we can select here increment or decrement. First one is the year, and next one is the week. First week, second week, like that. And you can increment or decrement. And even with this date calendar, we can select. Like this, then submit. Then week, the number of that week that will be transferred to the server program. Okay, you can try this exercise by yourself. Let's move to the next. Input attribute. Here we learn about the input value attribute. This one is specifying an initial value for an input field, and there are so many attributes, and we learn. One of them is value first. This one is showing the initial or default value. Here, value. As we learned already, this one is initial value for that variable, and that if we are not selecting, if we are not changing, then that initial value for that variable name f name here, and the second one is l name, last name. They will be sent to the server like this. And another attribute, read only. And this one, if we are providing this attribute read only, then we cannot modify, we cannot write, because that is defined read only as read only. Thus, if we want to change something here, instead of John, we cannot change. But the next one, last name, let's look at this one. That is not using read only, thus we can change that like that. Okay, disabled. As the name, this attribute means, this one is disabled. And this one is specifying that an input field should be disabled. And this disabled input field is unusable and unclickable. Let's look at here, John. Disabled, thus we cannot change. Let's try to send. And that disabled one, that is not sent to the server. Because that is disabled. One either last name and the value for that will be sent to the server. Size attribute. Size attribute, we can confine the size of that input field. This input size attribute specifies the visible width on the screen, and the visible width that is in characters, and we can specify the size with numeric number. And this size attribute can be used for these input types: text, search, telephone, URL, email, and password. And we can show some size shown on the screen, and depending upon our design, that may be used. The size of that window screen in the smartphone, that may be different from the size of the PC. Thus, in that case, we can control that size with this size and the number. Here, size 50. That means 50 characters can be shown here. And that is showing only that the size. And even though this size is 50, we can put in more. That is maximum length, that is confining that the number of input characters. This size is only showing the screen size for that input entry here. Okay, let's try to change this one. 5. You can see this one. Even though that is size is 5, we can put in more, but that is a little bit different, and this size is a little bit rough instead of exact size, and we can still put in more. Thus, this one is showing only the visible size instead of the real input number of characters. and we'll look at that maximum length later. Yeah, this one is following. Maximum length attribute. This one is specifying the maximum number of characters allowed in an input field. There's the previous side is showing the screen size, and this maximum length is controlling the real number of input characters. Here, even though the screen size is 1, for example, let's try the minimum one here. You can see this one is not real 1 character. We can put in more. Thus it is a little bit rough instead of exact size. Here we can put in more, but that is let's try to do this one. Let's look at this one. Input pin, type text, ID pin, and name pin. Here, the maximum length is 4. Then means only 4 characters can be put in here. That's the maximum. Even though that is screen size is 1. Thus, as I mentioned already, the exact screen size that is different from this number 1. And now that is containing more characters. And now this maximum length, we are learning this one. Only that is the maximum characters, number of characters, that is 4. If we are changing this one 1, then only one character can be put in here. This one is restricting that number of input characters. Thus we can understand the difference between size and the maximum length. Minimum and the maximum attribute. Minimum and the maximum attribute we can control depending upon the type. If that minimum and the maximum is being used for that type, date type, that is related to the date, and as we learned already, and the minimum date, thus we can put in after some date. Also, if that is being, this minimum and the maximum is being used for other type, like this number, then we can control the range for that number to put in. Okay, multiple attribute. If we are using this multiple attribute, then here we can choose many at the same time. Here, file, if that is being used here, file type, then we can choose many files together, like this, then those are being sent. And here, this one is showing only the result. to selected files. Two files are selected. Sorry about the Korean characters here. Pattern attribute. As we learned already, this pattern may be used for different input types, for text type, data type, search type, URL type, telephone type, email type, even for the password type. This pattern may be used. Okay, here type text, and that is related to the country code, and that pattern is here, and that is 3 characters, and that is alphabet, uppercase and lowercase, 3 characters. Thus you can select any character among them, but if we are selecting numeric number, then there is something wrong. Thus this one is showing some error message. The error message, 3-letter country code, please write the 3-letter complying to that characters. Thus you can put in 3 characters. If we are trying to put in more characters, then still it is not complying to that pattern. That should be limited to 3. Then it is successful. Placeholder, as we learned already, this one is showing some initial value. Sometimes we want to show some example to recommend to comply to that pattern, like this. Then user can refer to this pattern, and the error case will be reduced. Required. If we are using this required attribute, then that should not be missed. Thus that should be required. And the step attributes, as we learned already, if we are incrementing or decrementing, then depending upon that step value, we can jump. Step 3, that means whenever we are clicking this increment or decrement, that this jumping 3 by 3, like this. Autofocus. Autofocus means this attribute specifies that an input field should automatically get focused when the page loads. Sometimes initial loading, after initial loading, we want to show some cursor or input that is called focus, like this. This cursor is blinking here. That means we can put in some character, in this case first name, here. Initially that is blinking first, thus we can put in this first name first. If we want to change the last name first, we want to blink that cursor here, then instead of here, autofocus. Then let's move to here, to this last name part, and run again, and you can see when this one is loaded, okay, let's try to reduce. Okay, it is not running successfully. Let's go back here. And this autofocus should be moved to here, and that field, last name field, that should be selected first. But it is not working, something wrong. And if you are trying to your smartphone, it may work. It is not working. And here, that the cursor should be blinking here, and something wrong here. That is called autofocus. And that should be blinking here, and it is not blinking. That means this editor is not showing the correct result. So you can try it to your smartphone, then here your cursor may be blinking here. Height and width attribute. Okay, let's try to enlarge first. Oops. This input height and the width attribute specifies the height and width of an input type image. We need to control the size of that image. For example, here, for that GIF image, okay, width and height here. To control the size, you can enlarge. Instead of this 148 pixel, 148, then you can see the enlarged image here. This attribute we can control. But to control that kind of design, if possible, we should use the CSS instead of this attribute. Later we'll look at, and later we'll learn about that in the CSS tutorial, a little bit more about that. And list attribute. This one is referring to a data list element, and it is containing predefined options for an input element. Here, some enumerated options will be shown like this. If we want to choose one browser among many others, and here we can select one of them, and we can list it to this data list and option like this, and the browser name here, they are contained in this value field, value attribute. Okay, let's look at this autocomplete attribute. Okay, this input autocomplete attribute specifies whether a form or an input field should have a autocomplete on or off. Into this one, we can control the autocomplete, and this one is allowing the browser to predict the value. When a user starts to type in a field, the browser should display options to fill in the field based on, this is important, based on earlier typed values. The autocomplete attribute works with the form and the following input types: text, search, URL, telephone, email, password, date pickers, range, and color. Let's look at this example. Here we are using autocomplete 1, and here this is disabling that autocomplete. And let's look at this real example. Before that, let's look at this tip. In some browsers, you may need to activate an autocomplete function for this work. Okay. Let's look at this real example. Here you can type. You are trying to type in something. If that was typed already, if that word or character string start with the same character, then it is showing that. Then you can simply select. Then you don't know, even though you didn't typed in, it is autocomplete. And here, if you want to type other character, then there is nothing. There's we cannot see the autocomplete character string, but already that was typed in. Then if we are trying to type in the first character, then it is showing that. Then simply you can click that, and that is chosen, and that is completed automatically. That is called autocomplete property. You can try others by yourself. Let's move to the next. This is more explanation about the form attribute, and this is the not element, form. This one is form attribute. And the input form attribute specify the form the input element belongs to. And the value of this attribute must be equal to the ID attribute of the form element it belongs to. Example here, this one is using form here. We are learning this one. And this one is form attribute, not form element. It is a little bit confusing, but this one is new attribute in HTML5. And this one is belonging to that form 1, ID form 1. Here, that is the form 1. And even though that is outside of that form, the name, ID name is form 1, still this one is belonging to that. So let's look at first name and last name and submit, and you can see the variable and the value pair, those are sent as if it is belonging to here. Thus here we are using form 1, but if we are erasing this one, let's try again. in the same way, and I'll try to submit. And you can see only the first one belonging to this form 1, and they are different. This one and the next one is not belonging to that. Even though we put in the last name, that is not being sent. Only the first name, the variable and the value pair will be sent to the server, because there's no relationship between them. Form action. Also, action can be here. This action can be, this form action can be used to define other program, server-side program, to take care of this input. Sometimes for the customer, okay, let's look at this one. That may be better for understanding. Depending upon the user, that the data should be treated in different way for the plain user and for the administrator, web administrator. That should be different. And if this one is sent to the server with the submit button, then you can see this one. And let's use other. Submit to the administrator. Submit as admin. There's this one is being used, and that will be sent to different server program to take care of that administrator message. There's different server-side program. This one is action page 2 PHP program, and the first one is action page 1. Thus we can specify different action to deal with this input message. Sometimes we want to encrypt, then we can do that. For encryption, we can do this form encryption type. Okay, let's read this one first. The input form encryption type attribute specifies how the form data should be encoded when submitted. That is only for forms with method post. Get method, it is not related to this. This attribute overrides the encrypt type attribute of a form element, and this attribute works with the following input types. There's to make it different in terms of the encryption. You can use this form encryption type. The different encryption. This one for plain application, and for this secure encryption, you can provide this one using this form encryption attribute. Also, method. Even though we used method, with this form method, we can provide other method for this specific submission. Thus, in two ways. One is this way, and we can send. And you can see can method. That means in the URL you can see the send variable and the value pair you can see here. Let's go back. But here, if you are sending using this submission button, and this one's using post, you cannot see here because that is sent using that post method, and that is using HTTP header field to embed that data and to send to the server. For that specific method, you can try this form method. Also form target. We can, okay, let's delete this one first. Form target attribute. This one is specifying a name or a keyword that indicates where to display the response that is received after submitting the form. This attribute is overriding the target attribute of the form element. Anyhow, this form action, form target, those are newly introduced in HTML5. Okay, let's use this submit button, and you can see the self window. And if we are using this submit to a new window, then you can see the new window is being used to show the result. Because this one is form target underbar blank. Previous case that is using default is self window. And others form no validate. It is not validating, and you can try this no validate, and let's move to the next. Okay, that is the new topic. Let's try to reduce. Then we are here. Let's move here. Yeah, we'll skip this one, and in the first week we'll complete this one, HTML media, and that is completing the HTML5 tutorial. After that, we learn CSS tutorial, and these HTML APIs, those are using JavaScript, as I explained already. We'll come back here later after midterm exam. After learning JavaScript, we'll be back and we'll learn this and we'll complete later. But in terms of HTML5 tutorial, in next week, in the first week, we'll complete this one. Then we are completing the whole HTML5 tutorial before midterm exam. After this, we learn CSS tutorial.